Welkom, mijn naam is Bas van Werven en voor E.ON mag ik deze mooie serie M&A Dossier maken. En vandaag kijken we naar weer zo'n aspect wat speelt in een M&A-traject. En dat gaat over cybersecurity. Niet onbelangrijk, de wereld van tech ontwikkelt zich nogal snel. En daar moet je ook naar kijken als je een bedrijf overneemt of als je je bedrijf verkoopt. En dat doen we vandaag met twee Engels sprekende gasten. Christopher Conradi, en die is van FSN, Private Equity Huis. En Dritan Saliovski, en die is van E.ON. Heren, welkom. En toen begrepen ze me niet, want ze spreken allebei Engels.
M&A Dossier, de podcast.
Welcome, my name is Bas van Werven. And in this series of vidcasts called M&A Dossier, hosted by E.ON, we will today explore the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and value creation in M&A transactions. From both a strategic option as well as the operational standpoint. And this vidcast will focus on how technology-driven due diligence and post-transaction value protection are critical in modern private equity deals. We will also dive into the role of cyber and digital risks, addressing how companies can safeguard their value pre- and post-transactions, and the collaboration between advisory services teams like E.ON's M&A team and digital leaders like CDO. This conversation aims to provide insights that help other digital and finance professionals, meaning you, enhance value creation and risk management in their own M&A processes. Now, we hope that we can shine a light on all those aspects, and therefore I've gathered two experts here at the table. Christopher Conradi from FSN. Chris, thanks for having you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you came all the way over. You brought good weather.
I did, yeah.
Thanks very much, because we need that. And Dritan Saliovski, who is from Texas, actually came from Sweden.
Yeah, you can't tell me I brought the good weather from Stockholm.
But so you did. You're from E.ON, gentlemen. Welcome.
Thank you.
Before we start to really go and dive deep into the M&A and details, I would like to pose a personal question first. Dritan, how did you end up in the M&A business?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. But I think it was a long, long time ago in high school when I started my first business and tech business, and I started a company called Collider.com, still around today. Built that kind of from the ground up, really learned about technology, real technical. And then we ended up selling it a few years later to Verizon Media. It wasn't the most strategic move, but of course I was in my 20s, straight out of high school, sold a business and learned a lot. And then through my corporate years have now landed into the M&A a lot wiser from a transaction perspective. I think I would make much different moves back then, but here I am 20 years later.
Yeah, and here we are 20 years later with all more tech, more smart tech, more cybersecurity and stuff we will discuss later on.
Yeah.
Well, the next 10 minutes are yours, Chris, because how did you end up in M&A?
You know what? I wake up every day asking myself the same question. In a good way, though. So I have a background from engineering. I worked for Google. And there was this guy from a company called FSN Capital who called me one day and said, we need a CDO. Would you like to apply for the role? And I kind of hung up because private equity to me was nothing. But they were very persistent. And I think I was sold on the culture and the way FSN Capital is really trying to make a difference in the world. And, as a person in Google, you're sort of a small cog in a very big machine. In private equity, where I am now, we have direct impact on what goes on in the world, right? We have 3.5 billion euros under management. That's a lot of money, and you can put that to good work, right? Yeah. So I was sold on that. And it's also good coming into a new industry, because Google and private equity are very different. And the humbleness of being the stupidest guy in the room, very often, I like that feeling. So it's good.
Yeah. Sometimes you're the smartest guy in the room.
Sometimes.
Yeah. And your investment, the private equity company, mostly focuses on tech.
No, so we're in 4 industry verticals.
Yeah.
Tech is one of them.
Okay.
But I think today every company is sort of a tech company, right?
Absolutely.
At least there is a tech angle to it. So my team is involved in every investment we do, both pre-acquisition, but also after we have bought the company as an owner.
Okay. Yeah. Now we're greatly moving into your profession. You consider that. Well, technology can both accelerate value creation and expose vulnerabilities, we both know. How do you approach balancing innovation with risk management in M&A?
Oh, it's so difficult, right?
But the balance is unbelievably difficult.
It is. So I think inherently, private equity companies have different strategies on how we find companies and what companies we tend to buy. FSN that I work for, we buy the market leader or the kind of second runner-up, which inherently means that these companies, they're doing something right.
Yeah.
So that also goes into the tech side. So it's very rare that we come into a company and their tech stack is in chaos. It's often very, very good put together. So for me, it's not as much about, you can never mitigate risk. Risk will always be there. We deal with risk every day. That's our job. So it's more about understanding the risk and then understanding the opportunities. So we spend a lot of time really understanding what they have. And then we go through this. We have this thing with Aon called a PsyQ assessment. It's really just going through everything they have from top to bottom to figure out where are the risks and what is the exposure. And then by doing that exercise, you're getting a good sense of what the company looks like from the inside. But it also triggers a lot of these, wow, they're doing this thing. What about we do this thing? So we're kind of having the magnifying glass on the company for a week or two. It really, really makes us understand where we can take this company after we buy it. So
okay, also post-transaction, you can decide based on what you see there, how they will evolve, how they will develop.
Correct. Yeah,
but that's good. And how do you do that? Because normally, if you have the financial side of the business, you check the books and that's it. But on these matters, digital matters, and also looking a bit in the future, how are things going to develop? How do you do that?
It's difficult. So when we invest in a company, we sit on the company for 7 to 10 years. And then, the exit strategy is then to sell it to somebody else maybe that will also sit on this company for 7 to 10 years. Yeah. So our horizon is at least 20 years. How do you make a prediction of what is good or bad in the next 20 years? Yeah. So what we do, we make some very large bets in terms of the macro trends in what we see. I think, the green transition is certainly one of them. I think that will be true for the next 20 years. I think tech is another one. So I think these two are very clearly there. So when we go and we search for companies, this is interesting. When I was brought into FSN, I thought my job was to find the next good company to buy and help FSN on that journey.
Yeah, the next Google, actually.
Oh, yeah. If I could do that would be good. But I think it took me 2 years to understand what is the best company to buy. That's the wrong question to ask. We have people that are really good at investigating companies and figuring that out. The right question to ask is what industry should we invest into? And how you do that is a long story. I could spend days talking about this, but really you need to classify companies. Yeah. So we started on this journey, figuring out what is an industry. If you look at medtech as an industry, it's often classified as an industry. Medtech is insulin meters, which are these gizmos that you measure your insulin with. But it's also protein folding companies, which is high performance compute, totally different businesses, but they're grouped in the same
that's
area.
Also tech business.
Correct. Yeah. So if you ask me, is medtech a good investment for the next 20 years, is an absurd question because what is medtech? So 4 years down the road, we sort of have an answer to that, and large language models was a big part of helping us do that, to cluster companies and figure out what is an industry. And then we take that, so we say, here's an industry that we believe in because it has different aspects. We take this to our investment team, and now they can find a good company to buy.
Okay. And that actually works. You did that.
Yes.
Can you give an example from the last company you bought without mentioning names?
No, for sure. So we run every company we buy through this engine. Yeah. What we didn't kind of see coming, that was sort of a bonus to this data platform that we built, is M&A for the companies that we already own. So I'll give you an example that's quite fun. It's just a random example, but we have a company that wanted to move into Germany. They're big in the Nordics and they wanted to go into Germany. So they have a growth strategy where they want to buy inorganically into Germany. How do you find what targets they should approach? Yeah. So how we do that normally is we run this through our sourcing engine, and we find a list and 500 companies, and we work with the M&A team in that company to limit that list, to find the good companies. Yeah.
A few viable.
That process is so interesting. So you sit with M&A manager and you kind of go through this iterative process where you're finding, this is an interesting aspect. Let's add that as a filter. Let's add this. This manager, she had noticed that for these type of companies they were buying, if they had a picture on their website that was a group photo of the employees, that was very often a good sign that was a good company. Super random.
Yeah.
So, we spent an afternoon building a little AI thing that recognizes
filter,
that. Filter, and picks out these group photos. And that's a group photo. And by adding that filter, we got so many good companies that was now on this list. So it's a random example, but using AI and using these new technologies allows you to work very creative in finding these companies that was impossible 5 years ago.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And Dritan, over to you. How you help obviously companies like FSN in this, as Chris told, in this particular processes. How do you do that? How does which tools do you use? And they make the list eventually. Yeah. You get involved as soon as there's an M&A process coming along.
Yeah, similar to I think what Chris said was, he doesn't make the decisions on what to buy, but he helps provide the data that they need to make the right decisions, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we ultimately do the same thing, right? And not just, of course, with Chris and FSN, but with all private equities, we do a little bit different scenarios. But here, in the case of more generally speaking, we work with companies at the phase of what we call kind of prospecting or funneling, where you have the target list from Germany, and then we add the data that they may need from a risk perspective. That's a very topical, complement to what they're already conducting for that process. Yeah. And it's kind of a pre-screening. And then once they come down to a select few companies where we then conduct the traditional diligence on, we use data, outside data. So we have a group of analysts similar to, of course, what FSN does, but ours are more specialists from a cybersecurity perspective, and then we also have digital. So we have a lot of data, everything from insurance to incidents, digital forensic and incident response data, to our analysts across the globe that are then able to what we call kind of fingerprinting a company, where we're just given the name of a company, and we go to their site and see if they have a portrait on their site. And that often can lead to things coincidentally, right? So who's here? Is this potential owner or participant in this company, or risk to the company? And what we're trying to essentially answer for investors are a few questions here. The first one is there an incident that the company has been aware of and is publicly disclosed? Or is there an incident that they may not be aware of?
Yeah.
What is the likelihood of an incident occurring after we close? And are we accepting of the financial impacts of that incident? And if we're not, what do we need to do to put in place to mitigate that or bring it down to a level that we can accept? And that can be through, of course, just naturally accepting it, understanding the risk, remediating it, or transferring it. Transferring isn't just insurance as we do at Aon, but it's also transferring it to an IT provider, to a third party, to contractually kind of shift that. But a really good example here is we did one for a technology company acquisition for an investment bank. We understood their strategy, so we're closely aligned to their digital team, their value creation team, as Chris, in that similarly. And we understood what they were actually also looking to inorganically grow into a market. It was a technology provider. And one of the first things that we do is we go in and we look for, if we haven't already been provided any type of financial data or public disclosure or news information and articles around the globe, and we collect that information and draw somewhat of a hypothesis. And with this particular prospective target, we very quickly found their strategy was to enter into more broadly into reoccurring revenue in the security space to offer a SaaS solution. Then we started focusing on this, and then we read in a financial statement through a local municipality that we were able to actually pull that they were actually looking to expand in the public sector. So when we took the fingerprint of the outside in approach and we looked at what their security posture was ultimately and their technology stack, what we actually identified was they had significant vulnerabilities from the outside, and that could impact their security. But what we do is we took it one step further and said, how is that applicable to the strategy of the buyer here? Well, if they're looking to buy this target and this target had prospective public sector growth strategies, the public sector will oftentimes do a similar exercise to us. This was a mid-cap company looking to go into the enterprise public sector space. So what implications does that have in their growth strategy after the acquisition of their revenue to actually enter markets of public sectors? So we made that prevalent, and the buyer was aware, and they used this as a strategy going forward in the deal, but also planning post-signing on what they would actually do to create value and ensure that they can accelerate that value in the timeline that Chris was saying of that 7 to even 20 years.
If I can, I want to say one thing. You are more in the opportunity side of the business. You are more from the risk side of the business. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct. Well, if we let's go a little bit deeper and move on a little bit outside of the M&A thingies. Cybersecurity, how does that play? Because we hear a lot of companies in Holland, they are aware of the fact that there are cybersecurity risks. There are risks because they use tech. Are they aware of what they do? I will ask Chris first, Dritan.
If you look at the risks that we have in the assets that FSN owns, there's very few things that can take an asset from being worth billions to being worth zero overnight. And I think cyber risk is one of the very few.
Yeah.
So we take that extremely serious, and I think it starts at the top. So having a good relationship with the board, extremely important. I feel that these companies are taking it seriously. I think at some points there's a competency gap. That's why we have Aon as a good partner that comes in and helps us with that. Yeah. And there's, I think you can fall into this trap of not being pragmatic. I've seen, not in this industry, but I've seen in other previous jobs, people doing cyber as more of a tick in the box exercise. Yes, we did it. And we have this ISO certification, whatever it may be. Correct. Like that's good for you, but that's not the point of it, right? So I think you need to kind of wrap this around an opportunity. So yes, you're doing this, but you're also gaining these things. So we work with Aon on that. And I always challenge Aon to also make it a little bit fun. So we do this thing called a tabletop exercise, basically sit every leader in the room and we go through a scenario playing it out. And to kind of turn that a little bit up to 11 to see how leaders react is a lot of fun. And I think, if you can bring that in, it doesn't need to be this boring, exercise that leads to just a tick in a box, but you have to wrap it and you have to sell it in a way. And I think that's what I try to do. And Dritan is helping me.
Now, this has been crucial, cybersecurity, for most companies, and it's a risk you want to mitigate. But now the thing is how to incorporate cyber due diligence into this M&A process. You've shown a little bit of light on that, Dritan. But how far does that go? Do you use ethical hackers, for instance, to challenge systems within a company, or how does it work?
Yeah, we use a plethora of things, right? I think it's about, and just to tag on to what Chris said, it's about making people uncomfortable, right? Financially uncomfortable, to make them understand that this is important. There's a risk. From $1 billion to zero, as Chris just mentioned. Yeah. But in respect to diligence and how and what, there's different levels, right? So we kind of start at the very high level, and of course this is everything's a financial decision, right? So we don't jump into a €100,000 diligence project immediately in most cases, but we kind of take a tiered approach, right? And we go in and initially we do an outside-in scan, and we have technologies, and then we have internal proprietary technologies, we have outside technologies that we have licensing on. And again, this gives us a fingerprint, and then we can perform a hypothesis, right? Yep. There's a very difference between findings in an infrastructure, as our background shows here, a digital target, a consumer products. Now, of course, all of them have the overlay of technology to some respect or another, and even infrastructure does too. But we have to take the outside-in approach and say, okay, what is a hacker seeing, right? Because a hacker oftentimes doesn't have, just like us, doesn't have the ability to just jump into an environment immediately. So they take an outside-in approach, and then they see where they can get in. And we do the same thing, right? Where's the value behind this company that we can get in and really hurt them and bring them to their knees? We do the same approach, and we take that hypothesis, and then we present that to the investor and say, here's what we think is going to occur and might happen. We feel that taking the next step into diligence should or shouldn't be done.
Incorporate that,
And then at that phase is when we actually go in and potentially, if we have access to management, a VDR ideally, some data, some interviews, and we take a little bit more of a practitioner-led approach where someone like myself or colleagues will go in and interview, whether it's a CEO that's not a technology individual or a CTO or CISO. Yep. And we'll get a really good understanding and gut feeling and saying, okay, we saw from the outside, we looked a little bit on the inside, and we talked to some individuals. How do we feel? And then the last phase is actually us going on site. We may do a physical exercise facility, or we may just walk in and sit down and just kind of shake hands with individuals. And there's those are kind of the phases of things, but it's all about just helping them understand through that process of what is the financial risk, and we can perform a high level with the data that we have really in the very early stages, and then continue to modify that until we can feel really comfortable that this is the actual quantification of loss for the company.
Have you ever had examples that you said, well, better not to do this deal because this company is not safe, not in the long run also safe?
Yeah, you read my mind, because I was going to jump to that and give you a really good example on an infrastructure project actually that we did in Europe. We followed that same approach. So we did a very, very light touch on the infrastructure, and we scanned the environment, and we found something interesting. It was a very small target, but a very broad footprint, and that really kind of struck some alarm bells for our analysts and ethical hackers. And so we advised the client to go in further. We did in the next phase, and we found out is the infrastructure company actually had an externally facing product, which was a commercial product that we were scanning the commercial side, which was not their responsibility. So we removed that from scope, and then we scanned what we call kind of the supporting infrastructure of that infrastructure, if you will. What we then found out that we still didn't feel comfortable about it. Then we advised that we would do additional interviews. In this case, we were kept very tight and retained in who we could interview. We did. We did not have a good feeling about the competency of what we were hearing, what we were seeing. We then we pushed. We brought up a red flag, a finding. We pushed to be on site. We flew in, 2 of us on site. We walked in the facility. We walked out a few hours later, and we formed an opinion that they had significant regulatory risk. They were exposing potentially all of their clients' data and information that was coming in from that product into their infrastructure. Oops. And that deal was pencils down for 18 months. They backed out of the deal. And they turned around in 18 months and ended up buying it at a reduced EBITDA and multiple. So they ended up going with the deal, but initially they ended up legal got involved because this was actually illegal with the data GDPR. Yeah. But this was a really good example. It doesn't happen often.
No, but that's sometimes it does. Yeah,
but sometimes it does, and when it does, it's pretty significant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. One thing, Chris, you told us earlier, is that you look also into the future. Eh? You try to get a good view on how the company will develop. Will Aon do the same if you do a due diligence like this on tech security risks? Will you also help your client in becoming aware of where the opportunities are, or mostly where the risks are in the future?
Yeah, we do have a commercial diligence, angle to things.
Angled on technical things. Also.
Yeah, on specifically on technical, on the technical aspect of things, right? So we do have a product that we're looking at from a perspective of working closely in the case of the digital value creation folks is they're. And my example before is this is a technology provider, SaaS, they're going into the security space. What does their infrastructure look like? Is their ability to scale and grow to that? Do they need to go from an on-site, from data centers in their closets to the cloud, or to a co-location of data centers, et cetera? So we do have more of a tech diligence that focuses more on the commercial side of things. It's not something that we do predominantly in our space today, but it is a small part of our business.
Hey, Chris, what will happen in due course? We got AI now. How is AI interacting with your everyday line of work?
Oh man, let's take one step back to what Dritan alluded to earlier about ethical hacking, right? So if you picture a hacker in your mind, it's probably a person, probably a young male adult sitting
lots of hair.
Yes,
drinks cola. Yeah,
there may be some truth to that, right? I think we as a techie, we in the tech industry, we're not good enough of telling the story of what hacking really is today. So it's the person sitting in the basement, doing on his computer, but it's also the person that calls the CFO and tries to lure him or her for money, right? Yeah. This is an area of concern to me. The way AI is moving, we're very short away from that being a reality, that you will get phone calls, you will get video calls, you will get all of these things, and it scales so well, right? So it's very easy to be fooled. How do you combat that? I have no idea, and I hope there's some very smart people working on that. So I failed to remember your question, but
I was asking, how does AI in the future will enhance your work, help you, or will cross your good intentions?
Yeah, and so that you'll make me look like a fool regardless of how I answer this question. Predicting AI is a very difficult task. But what we're seeing is it's at least helping us scale. I think there's a little paradox that we can't really wrap our head around. I had a discussion with some industry colleagues around this. If we go 1 year back, we're all looking at this AI thing blowing up, and we thought like the world will be changed in a year. All of our companies that we own and manage, they will just operate totally differently. They will be, everything will change. And then you go 1 year into the future, and there's this paradox of what has really fundamentally changed. Yeah. There are some better, customer service things. There are some use cases here and there. Don't get me wrong, and people are using this every day for writing emails or summarizing articles, whatever it may be. But has anything fundamentally changed yet? And I look across the companies that are private equity owned in Europe. I don't have any examples.
No.
So there's this paradox of there's this fantastic new technology that at least I use all day, every day. I chat with this bot and it helps me do my work more efficiently. But at the same time, is not fundamentally changing how companies operate. No. The answer to why that is, I don't know. I think there's a thing there where the models are inherently not deterministic. That means you will get a different answer every time you ask the same question. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to put into business process. So I think that's one. The other one is I think the technology is quite immature. So it's a little bit difficult to take away something and replace it by AI. Still, we're getting there.
Could be.
We're for sure getting there.
Yeah.
So this is maturing. So that's one prediction I have is we will go down that route. The other one is I think prices are not reflecting of the technology and the benefits these things are providing us.
Moment, yeah.
I pay $20 or euros per month for Claude or ChatGPT. Yeah. I would happily pay 10 times that, right? Probably 100 times.
Be careful.
Yeah.
Don't give anyone ideas.
Tell Sam Altman this. But I think the benefits of the technology is not reflected in price, and that usually price adjusts, right? So I think we're in this golden age of everyone has access, everyone's using it. Maybe we move into a world where only some companies or only some people can afford
actually,
this.
Yeah,
maybe, right?
Yeah,
yes.
Maybe. Yeah.
And then where does that leave the bad guys? I don't know the answer to that, but there's a lot of questions in my mind.
Yeah, but how will that reflect on the companies you will buy as a PE company? Because you have to have an agenda on that.
You kind of have to, right? And you're looking at this bakery chain. You're asking yourself, how will AI affect this bakery chain? And you have no idea, right? No. So there's a lot of hypotheses. There's a lot of thinking. There's very few answers. Yeah. So I think what we do currently in FSN, we try to kind of model out some scenarios of how this could play out. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, we haven't really changed our investment strategy. And we haven't really not bought a company that we would otherwise 3 years ago. Yeah. We don't see that. I think there are, if you go to the green transition that we're seeing, electrification, all of these things, there are certainly more changes we do to our investment thesis, but not so much AI yet.
No. How do you see that evolving, Dritan? For your own work, for instance, if you control data, if you try to get data and make couplings between data sets, what AI can do, or at least that's the promise that we are already facing. Will it help?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to. The short answer is it helps, and I think what Chris is alluding to is everybody was really excited a couple years ago about how AI was just going to create this new world of just everything being new and innovative. Mm-hmm. And what we've seen now is that it actually hasn't been able to do that, but it's actually enhanced our everyday activities, right? Like, ChatGPT, cloud. Thanks, Chris, for that one. I'm almost chatting with it on a constant basis, right? From psychological perspective, like my counselor. No, I'm kidding. But it's literally, and Klarna released in their financial statement just a couple months ago or so that just talked about how we didn't dive into AI to create anything new. We dove into AI to create efficiencies. And we saw significant financial gains from that. How it helps, how it helps us in cybersecurity. I think, we've been using AI for many, many years, right? And I think everybody knows what antivirus is, right? So it's like click and there's an antivirus, right? And about 8 years ago, there's this next gen antivirus that use machine learning. Now it's just called something, AI, and it's fancier, but there's nothing different. And it's all about correlating data, what you just said, right? It's just, if a machine gets something on a system that's potentially malicious, is there a machine across the globe at a different company that's doing the same thing? Well, Microsoft and Sentinel and CrowdStrike and all these big vendors that are AV, McAfee, and Symantec that we're familiar with have been doing this for so long. And it's nothing that's really new. But I will say what it is doing, and talking about threat actors, I want to give an example. I wish that more people would have heard about this, but it was the Ferrari executive example. And how AI was used to almost fool a multi-million-dollar transaction. It was successful in another example in Asia and between the UK, but in the Ferrari example, it was really cool. It was very clever. But what actors are doing is there isn't the ability currently to videotape, to video stream live a person through AI quite yet, but you can do a quick snippet of 1 minute, for example. That works really well. So what threat actors are doing is they're creating a relative quick video. Hey, I know that Dritan has, children, sports, a spouse from this country, etc. So I'm going to make a quick video and I'm going to hop on Teams and say, hey team, just a quick note. I'm with my child in Texas at my ranch. I got to show off my video really quick. Video off. Now I've built some trust with the person, right? So now I can in real time translate my audio because the technology is there.
That's okay.
So now I've psychologically fooled you into believing that I am the CEO.
You were on the line.
Correct. And this is what happened at Ferrari. And so the CEO of Ferrari, calls an executive and requests some funds to be transferred. The executive doesn't feel right about this. Very clever. And says, hey, before we get off the call, can you just remind me, a couple weeks ago when we were in so-and-so, you reminded me to read a book. I just forgot what that book was. Can you tell me what that book was again? And he didn't know. So because the threat actor, of course, hadn't done his research and wasn't with him.
The thing is, on the beach. What I hear from you both, gut feeling is something very important also in these processes.
And that's so relevant, right? It's all about the gut feeling. It's all about
And I think we're doing a bad job. Sorry to say, but as a tech professional, I think we're doing. If the system of can we pay millions of dollars to the wrong account is dependent on a CFO asking, did you read a book? We just built a bad system. So I think we're relying.
That was a good question. But
it is true, right? I think other places in tech, there's always checks and balances, and you kind of have to go through this process to get something bad done. I think in terms of transferring money and kind of these social engineering hacking, we're kind of one person clicking a wrong button away from doing something very, very bad. And we just need to be better. We need to build systems around people so that you can have a bad day and do something quick that was stupid, because everyone, including myself, can do that.
Make stupid mistakes.
We're humans. So that's what happens. So I think that's how I think about it in FSN. I need to constantly think about, including myself, we can all make mistakes. Let's build systems around that such that if and when that happens, we catch it and it doesn't kind of ruin the company, right?
Right. Let's move on to one last thing. Your roles, both of you, intersection with other advisors, like Aeon's, for instance, at FSN, to both protect and enhance value in your portfolio companies. How do you mentioned a bit, but
sure. So I have a team of a couple of people underneath me. We're 3 in Germany, we're 2 in Norway, we have 2 in Mumbai. And we can use those to increase values of the companies that we own. We're active owners. Problem is, there's a lot of companies and we're quite few people, right? So the balance is, where do I deploy my very few resources and where do we bring in our trusted partner network? So how we think about this is we have a few what we call products. These are things that we have done many times over, and they sort of scale, and we know how to do them. So those could be M&A, finding that list of companies. It could be price analytics to figure out what prices you should take for your merchandise. It could be net working capital reduction. So going in, finding out when do you do your invoicing and how should you do your invoicing or warehousing, whatever it may be. So we have these products. And then for anything else that is not something we're kind of very good at doing ourselves and can go in, do something and pull quickly back out.
Yep, we need
to scale through partners.
Yeah.
So we use Aon for anything cybersecurity. We use Aon for some M&A stuff. But then we have a handful of other partners that they know us. So anytime we bring them in, prices are negotiated. We have negotiated on, the contracts. They also know the industry. They know our companies. So we can kind of hit the ground running every time we go in.
Yeah.
So building that partner network is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. Same goes for you, because you have to work with other advisors also in these processes. How does that work? Does it work okay?
Yeah, it works really well. I mean, especially I can tell you, I've been in professional services for almost 20 years, I think, and not just because he's standing on the other side of the table here, but I think one of the most exciting and rewarding relationships that I have had is with FSN. I think the folks there are just, I think he said earlier, pragmatic, right? So there isn't really there isn't a wrong or right approach. There's just a way that everybody wants to move in the right direction, because there's always smart people in the room. And like Chris said, I love being the stupidest person in the room, and being humbled, because learning from others around you means that you're just marching forward in the right direction, that you just trust everybody, move forward. And it's the same thing with any client that we work with. It's really understanding what their goal they're trying to accomplish. Of course, it's about the numbers. But at the end of the day, there are obviously other micro decisions that are made. And then I think you asked about value creation. It's not just about value in, monetary value always. It is, of course, very important. But it's about efficiencies, right? I think what we do really well is if FSN or any other private equity or investment bank comes to us and asks us for something, and they tap into our insurance team, our tax team, our W&I team, digital team, et cetera, we work together to ensure that they are not actually, it's about efficiency, that they're not having to repeat themselves. They're not having to go make VDR access.
No, that's what Chris said. You move instantly.
Yeah, exactly. We move really quickly. Yeah. So it's making sure that we are just aligned, right? Yeah. So they can just tap into something, because they have the areas that they excel in, and then there's areas that others excel in, and then understanding the value that everybody brings to the table makes you move just that much quicker.
Great. You brought so much value to this table, and I was feeling like the stupidest person around. That's why I asked the questions.
Maybe we'll talk about scuba diving, and then I'll feel definitely.
We can do that. But I want to ask you some. Give me your golden tip to anybody who is in an M&A process, or be it from an advisory point of view or as a corporate. What you have your golden tip, what you've learned from these things, digital transitions and transactions and cybersecurity stuff. Okay,
so you're ending on a light touch there. Thank you for that. To me, I think it goes back to the humbleness that Dritan alluded to. So it's very easy to come in as the owner and think you know it all, right? You don't. There are smarter people out there, and the answer is often in the room and not with the leader, right? Mm-hmm. So you have two ears and one mouth for a reason. Listen, learn, observe. And when people say to you, this doesn't work because X, Y, Z, your first thought should be, that should make sense. If I don't agree, I probably haven't understood their position yet. So just humbleness is my tip.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your tip, Dritan.
Yeah, I mean, again, the smartest man in the room is right here across from me, so I don't know how I top that one. But I was gonna, honestly, when you asked that and I thought about it, was really just listening, right? It's really listening for us as advisors, is listening to the client, right? I think oftentimes advisors like to go in and just think that they know and they have a solution that's a square and the client is round, and they try and force it onto them. One thing, because we are, Aon's a very large multi-billion-dollar organization. Our M&A practice is in the billions, but it's very low billions. We're small in that respect, and we're very agile in our approach. And I think Chris will sit here. I've been working with him now for 2.5 years and his team, and we have morphed and we have developed actually products coming out of our relationship to say, okay, this is fantastic.
This
and
works.
then exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's listening to what the client wants, and adapting and building and making sure that it works for them, because diligence is diligence. It's been around for some years now from a tech and cyber perspective, but it's just because it works today, it's not going to work every day, and it's definitely not going to work for every client.
Yeah, so you have to know your client, keep your ears open, and trust your gut feeling sometimes.
Bingo. That's a perfect summary.
Thank you, guys.
Exactly.
Dritan.
Thank you, Bas.
Yeah, thank you both.
Dritan, Chris, thank you very much for being with us, for joining us today. If you want to learn more on how to mitigate risks, for instance, in your M&A process, you should watch all the episodes of this series, obviously. And I'm Bas van Werven. Thank you very much.
M&A Dossier, de podcast.